today in the Psychedelics headquarters in Breckenridge, Colorado, joined by Sean Lawlor. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Joe. It's really good to be here. First time in Breckenridge.
Really?
Yeah. I've been meaning to come here for so long, and it's just beautiful. Such a beautiful day.
It is
it's nice
gorgeous
to be
out.
with you.
Yeah, it's great to link up here finally. I feel like I've known you for many years now, but had very few chances to actually link up. So this is special. So thanks for making it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really nice.
So we're here today to talk about this new book, which I'm very excited about, Psychedelic Revival Towards a New Paradigm of Healing. This is definitely, I think, going to be a pretty impactful book overall for the space.
Thanks.
I haven't had a chance to read all of it yet, but what I have read is, I think, pretty ideal for what this burgeoning weird movement needs, or space. I'm kind of curious, like let's before we even talk about how the book came about, let's kind of talk about you and your path. So I know a couple things. You at one point in your life landed in Boulder, and then you did some writing for us, and then were you at Naropa as well?
Yeah.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. That's where this came to be.
So how did psychedelics kind of make their way into your life at first?
First of all, thank you for those really kind words. Really, really appreciate that, Joe. They came into my life during a semester abroad when I was an undergraduate. Well, do you consider cannabis a psychedelic?
Oh, it's a lovely argument. We're saying that it can, just similar to MDMA and ketamine, like we were talking about before, can instantiate psychedelic experiences, but saying like is a psychedelic is like, I don't know, it's a hard term. Like not always. And like in the same category, probably perhaps same with LSD. Like it's not always a psychedelic, but it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, on those lines, I had my first psychedelic experience with cannabis for sure, and just didn't know what was happening, didn't know what I was getting into. And it kind of altered the path I was on. I was just kind of going through the motions, like sophomore year in college, studying mechanical engineering because people are like, that gets you a good job. It's like, all right. And yeah, things kind of imploded internally. And I did the youthful thing of like not thinking about how things would play out and just what felt right at the moment, and switched to study philosophy. And that started just making sense and speaking to things. And I think I met more people who had taken mushrooms. This was in Southern California where I did my undergrad. And
where specifically?
University of San Diego.
And philosophy there.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's different from UCSD, USD?
Right. And
okay.
It's also just different than SDSU.
Right. Yeah, for those of you not living in California, it's a confusing university system.
Indeed.
But a great one. But that's great. Yeah. Were there any kind of philosophers that really spoke to you? Like when I like to speak about it and reflect on it, it was kind of like a Blaise Pascal. There's a few others that were kind of heartfelt like that. I really love Spinoza's work. More like the literary beauty of it than necessarily like the coherence of it.
Yeah. Which, is a great thing,
Yeah.
Especially for a philosopher, a lot of them are really boring.
Right. Anybody you grasped onto? I suppose it was probably Kant, right?
Oh, yeah. Surprisingly, I enjoyed Kant. I never read Critique of Pure Reason. It was Critique of Beauty, I think it was. So that was a little more enlivening. I guess I've been told this is kind of cliche, but Nietzsche really kind of helped break down some of the structures I was still carrying and like energize this rebelliousness. But everything ended up
cliche. They should get over that.
Yeah.
It's like the biggest issue with his work is that it's not systematic. It's beautiful. There's a lot of truth there, but you have to kind of like work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Tearing down structures. But everything ended up filtering into Carl Jung. I got obsessed with Freud at first. Like that was like the first thing that helped me understand some of what was going on in my mind, like in this introspective way I'd never really done.
I love the early discussions on Freud, which is super funny to me.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Little nod to his cocaine use.
Very neuroplastic inducing agent. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Freud gets ripped on a lot, and it's kind of fun time to time, but I still think he contributed a lot of really important things, and to the psychedelic, psychedelic therapy and that theory as well. But
do you know the Joseph Campbell line about Freud?
I don't think so.
Freud was fishing while standing on the back of a whale, which I think is like really clever, but it's like, yeah, it was just the thing we weren't able to examine yet. But we were just, a number of us, I think, were just right there.
Totally.
But he did it first, for sure.
Yeah, and he had the status and whatever that whole thing was in Vienna.
Well put.
Yeah. But yeah, Jung kind of blew the lid off. I got into Jung after I tried mushrooms, which was my first psychedelic during semester abroad in Australia. Just really, I think I talk about it right at the beginning of the book. It was just such a beautiful day, and I was really into William James at the time. And
you landed on all the important ones.
Yeah, it like all made sense once I started learning about the psychedelic field in like 2016, 2017. I was like, wow, so many of the things I've been interested in just are in this.
How old were you think when you had that first mushroom experience in Australia?
I was 21.
Great.
Yeah.
It's still obviously quite young, but it's better than the people that like stumble into it at like 10 or 12 by a long shot.
I know some folks, yeah.
Yeah, they survive somehow quite well mostly, but it's got to not be an easy way.
Often sounds very horrifying, traumatizing.
Right. Absolutely. You can get really lost, and it's already confusing to be adolescent and child,
Totally. Yeah, that would not have been good for me. It's 10 or 12. Felt like finally ready, and I think it was a pretty small dose. So
how did it go? Like, you started getting exposed to some of the literature, and 2016's right when we started, May 2016. So
nice.
We're coming up on 8 years next month.
Congrats.
So thank you.
Man.
It's been an interesting ride, but
yeah, you guys have just been this like solid through line. Just
trying.
Ever since I came upon this, you've been there and just have been consistent, putting out great stuff the whole time.
Yeah, there was a few moments where we talked about pumping the brakes temporarily, but I was like, I don't know. I think like the space really needs something really consistent.
Yeah.
Because, how many podcasts and blogs like came and gone.
Yeah.
Like, it's great. It's good effort, but there's a lot more value if you stay for longer.
Totally.
Kind of like you stayed for long enough where you've got a book now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Did the Naropa Masters, and yeah.
What'd you do there?
It was mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling was my degree. It was a 3-year program. It's like the one of 5 Naropa tracks to become a counselor.
That's great. Are you currently licensed or?
I have an LPCC, so pre-licensure. So I'm like gaining hours for licensure.
It's a long road.
It's a long road. Yeah, I understand more now why people decide to go a different route, not go the licensure route.
Right. For sure. There's a lot going on there. I guess before we dig into your book, let's talk about that for a minute because we're already here. So what do you wish you knew more going into a licensed track training? Like, were there certain things about licensure that you weren't super aware of yet, or anything that would be of value now?
Totally. Definitely like just the admin like stuff, all the tracking of hours, all the random forms and sheets of paper you need signed. Like, I would have mentally prepared for that more, because like that is not a strong suit of mine. I struggle with that. And so that, and like there's a kind of stress around licensure whenever people talk about it, you know, like it raises the stakes. There's all these like eyes on you, and people are kind of paranoid, like in a way, like if you make sure you do this, you know, cover your ass. That's what a lot of people say. And I feel like I have a tendency to kind of like take things on from other people more than I should. It's like still a work in progress, and I internalize that more than I wish I did. Like it's good to be careful and like be mindful of all the things you have to do, but like now I have like a stress response when I think about licensure in general, and especially in the psychedelic space, like, you know, it's still, there's so much gray area.
Yeah, there's a lot that needs to be tested in courts and at licensing boards and other places, right? Before we can actually know how safe should we feel.
Totally. It's like different, you hear different things from different agencies or regulatory bodies and stuff, and yeah, leaders of nonprofits.
One of our friends in the, I'll call it the Deep South for convenience sake, went to her licensing board and said, I'm practicing psychedelic integration. And did a quick pitch. This is all like on record at a normal meeting. And none of them shot it down. None of them said anything. So now it's like on record at the license board that she's doing this thing that's some jurisdictions, some license boards might think is against the code of ethics or whatever.
Yeah, that's cool that she went through that. So there's
bold.
that. It's bold. Yeah, totally. She was already licensed when she did that. That's really bold. Yeah, lots of respect.
Yeah, right. And we see a lot of that activity in our scene, right? Like you're willing to put your neck on the line for that interesting thing. Amazing. Thank you. But also, oh my.
Yeah. You're risking your livelihood.
Yeah. Cool. And what so how I frame this is often there's certain things that really require somebody with a license, a clinician, to work on, and there's you know, probably reasonable stuff for people outside the clinical frame to work on that shouldn't be worked on in the clinical frame. Like I'm sure you thought about that, but what are a couple things that would say like somebody really needs to stay inside a clinical frame when they're exploring this kind of work?
That's a really good question.
Deep right away.
Going deep there. I mean, the thing that jumps immediately to mind is people with really complex trauma. You know, I know there's some amazing underground therapists who could work amazingly with people with trauma. It's like technically outside the clinical frame, but like there's also people who aren't, and it's unregulated, and as you and I have talked about a lot, can like really cause a lot of harm and damage. So yeah, in the clinical frame, you have the benefit of like knowing what people's specific trainings are and kind of where they've focused, and people with specialties in trauma just can way more often than underground or outside of clinical spaces, I think, create a really safe feeling container. And especially compared to like, you know, ceremonies, group ceremonies where maybe they're held really well and facilitated really well, but you're also probably in a room with like 30 strangers or 20 strangers, and who knows what's going to come up with the person next to you and whatever they're going through and what that might bring up in you. So yeah, where safety is, I mean, I think safety is always paramount, but with deep trauma, if someone doesn't tend to feel safe, I would really recommend the clinical frame.
Yeah. I think folks with very complex trauma, absolutely. I think I once in a while hedge on the clinician topic because I'm like, okay, like some people just because you're somehow linked to the state through your license and this other stuff, it's like, can I trust you more or less? Like,
right.
The amount I don't tell my doctors and therapists is fascinating to me. At this point in my career, you'd think that I have like a doctor that's an actual ally, and I don't. I just
because they're connected to these
right
complex systems of power.
Yeah, and not to mention some of them are just not good at their job anyway.
Right.
Like, cool, you got a license, but geez.
Totally. Same
Yeah.
thing here. Yeah, I would just like, trust someone because they have a license. Like,
is it a good fit? And like spending time getting to know them. And
how do you feel in the room?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just trusting your intuition.
That would actually be a good toolkit for somebody to make, is like, here's your therapist screening checklist.
Yeah.
How did you feel after?
Right. Yeah. The therapist is always, getting information on the client. There should be a reciprocation of that.
Yeah.
That like going through the checklist, making sure that it fits.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. That could really honestly improve clinical result if we studied that in an interesting way.
Yeah.
Sure, somebody's looked at it.
And my supervisor, Dory Lewis.
No, not yet.
Okay, she's she co-runs a thing with Shannon Hughes, organization called Elemental Psychedelics, where they do trainings and stuff, and then she runs this group practice, reflective healing in Fort Collins, and that's where I'm working with doing ketamine therapy, and she's given me some great advice about that, which is that it's really important for me as the therapist to feel it out too and make sure that it's comfortable for me, then that it's actually like, if I don't feel comfortable with the client and like, I'm like, okay, well, I can still do this for you. It's actually like kind of like unethical to do that, because like I'm not going to be able to be like as spacious or regulated in myself as I can to hold that space.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a book in that vein, The Ethics of Caring by Kalia Taylor, talking a lot about this kind of dynamic, and
nice.
It goes a lot bigger than that, but it's a good reference point for folks. So let's rewind the tape. So you got out of Naropa. When did you start getting interested in writing a book? Like, you've been interested in writing for a while, but how did the book come about?
Well, I started writing like I would consider. Yeah, my starting point with writing, it was like right at the same time I took mushrooms abroad. I just started writing in a journal and writing every day, and then like got obsessed with literature and writing, and I've like envisioned writing ever since, and like things have gone all kinds of different directions. And I was a teacher at a high school for a while and teaching writing. I was like, why am I still not doing it? Like, I'm kind of trying, but not really. And then came out here and started doing it, and led me to writing about psychedelics in 2018, I think was the first thing I had about psychedelics, for Rooster magazine.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate them for, opening that door. Yeah. And I just kind of kept following it because it was fascinating me so much, learning about everything. And then, met you, and, I had a few pieces out then, but you gave me the opportunity to write some stuff for Psychedelics Today, which was really great. Like such a cool thing. Like, you had such a good following and just were awesome to work with through and through. Like, it just felt really supported and really enjoyed that. So yeah, I
was the editor on the first one, maybe.
I think you were. Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild to think I was editing at one point.
Yeah. I think it was the interview with Carl Hart.
Oh my God, that's so awesome that happened.
Yeah.
I went back to it like not that long ago, actually.
Nice.
It's good.
Yeah, that was cool. Really cool that he did that. But yeah, to try to make the long story less long, led me to Naropa. I was like, I want to be a psychedelic therapist and write about it. And there was an article I wrote for Psychedelic Times called about 5-MeO-DMT, about Bufo and kind of light and shadow in it. And a old writing teacher of mine who had become a friend, who's local to Colorado, her name's BK Lauren, really, really great writer and teacher. And she read that. I think I sent it to her like towards the beginning of the pandemic, and she has like amazing intuition, to where it feels almost like beyond intuition. And she gave me a call and was just like, I think that you have a book in this. And I was like, what? Like, I don't know about that. And she was like, no, I think you do. And She was, she's been in the business for a while, for a few decades, and very generously was like, I know an acquisitions editor at Sounds True, and I think I could at least like put you in contact. And I was like, okay. And nothing happened for a while, but then she connected us, and it just turned out at that time that she did that Sounds True had just recently decided they wanted to do a book about psychedelics. And I was like, okay, but they were kind of looking for a writer who was known, like in the space and stuff, but gave me the opportunity to write a book proposal. So I kind of laid out a plan for a book over the course of like 12 pages or something. And with that and BK's help and the generosity of the acquisitions editor, Jennifer Brown, got the deal. And I was about halfway through my time at Naropa.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Wow. And what does your process look like for something like this, as big as a book? Like, I assume it has to be one by one, chapter by chapter or something.
You would think, but that is not my style. That would be much more efficient and probably wouldn't have taken me 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. When I try to do it like that, like kind of sequentially and like plan it all out, I don't enjoy it.
Right.
And that could sound kind of selfish, but I have this underlying philosophy in writing that if I'm not enjoying writing it, people aren't going to enjoy reading it.
Right.
If it feels boring for
Absolutely.
me to write, it's going to be boring to read.
Yeah.
So I struggled with that at the beginning, and then I can't remember what I was writing one day, but I think I had a microdose, and I just kind of let it go some different directions and kind of waning philosophically about I think it was about kind of nonlinearity and healing and pulling in some kind of Joseph Campbell archetype stuff, and it just felt alive. And so I started just kind of like, I'd sit down and be like, okay, what feels like it has some life today, and kind of follow that and just kind of trust like we'll be able to weave it together in the end. But that was hard. It seemed impossible to weave it together, and I got some good help from editors on that, and it's still not perfect in that regard, but I just kind of do that, and it led to it being a really enjoyable process overall. And if I felt bored when writing it, I'd kind of stop and be like, all right, how can I make this a little more fun? Like, usually turn to like a Star Wars reference or something like that. Like,
I appreciate that you were putting in jokes here and there. It's like, okay, cool, and like callbacks to Freud and like other fun stuff. There's definitely some fun in here, and I really appreciate that, because people try to be so boring so they can be taken seriously.
Right?
There's some shadow there.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, there's so many articles out now that are just like PR pieces, or just like regurgitating like a science paper that like I don't want to read this. This is boring. And like, I got into psychedelic stuff with like Ken Kesey and Hunter S. Thompson, and like,
not boring.
Yeah, Aldous Huxley. Yeah, not boring. Like, Hunter S. Thompson is like the opposite of boring. Like, it's just so frenetic and amazing. So I wanted to like just try and lean into that more, and not
Have you been to Woody Creek Tavern?
No, I would love to go. Have you?
Once. It's
outside Aspen.
Yeah, it's like on the way to Aspen. It's not as like raw as you would think a place that he would hang out at. It's worth going. It's definitely worth going, chilling there for a bit. I'll go back a few more times at least.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you think it used to be more raw and like?
I bet, like when he was in his heyday, I bet it was like a nightmare. I've not that I'm not a fan, but I just like understand, how weird it can get.
Yeah.
Especially with him.
Oh yeah, totally. I think I heard like Tom Wolfe describe him once about like, maybe it wasn't him. Someone described like how if there wasn't like a problem or a tension, he'd just create it. Yeah.
I bet.
Like, it goes to Vegas to report on this car race or whatever, and like the actual thrust of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is about all these insane situations he kind of creates for himself.
It's one way of being creative.
Yeah, he was a unique fella.
So I want to circle back to Las Vegas and Hunter Thompson, but like let's go get more general about the book. So from my understanding, this is like a really great primer. Like a lot of people historically, I don't know, since 17 when the Pollan book came out, like that was the primer.
Yeah.
But there's only like 3 or 4 drugs in it. There's a lot of like really decent storytelling, but like I don't think it was like as tight as it could have been. But it's highly readable, got a lot of sales, right? But like what you've done seems like a really concise, tight thing with great stories that don't go on and on and on forever, but like great stories that are valuable to know, really great information and resources on a plant, fungus, and drug basis, right? It seemed like a really coherent thing. And was your intent to make this kind of landing book for people who are coming on board to the movement or are curious?
Totally. Yeah. And I, once again, really appreciate that feedback. When I first got connected with Sounds True, they kind of envisioned like wanting to do a kind of reference book for psychedelics. It was a little more encyclopedic, and they had a vision of like kind of like a bigger thing, that's just filled with information. And fortunately, they're such a supportive publisher. Like I just went all these different directions, and they were always supportive. And I feel like in the end, it kind of came around to like being that. I was still like following the kind of general topics, which like when I laid it out in the book proposal, just I tried to cover everything that at that time like had, I guess, entered my field of what people were talking about, what
you hit all the most important substances, right? Like at least the most popular.
Yeah. Which was tricky, to kind of like exclude some that should have been included, and with the plant medicines as well. Done on that disclaimer, by the way. In the beginning, the disclaimer about like psychedelics versus plant medicines, because that's becoming an increasingly in focus debate and discussion right now. Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I'll be on stage with Sandor Ironrobe from Native American Church in Aspen end of May, and we're going to get into that a little bit.
Really? Is that for like a conference?
The Aspen Psychedelic Symposium.
Oh, I'll try to go to that.
Cool.
I went to South Dakota to interview Sandor for the book. Really, really. Yeah, I appreciate that guy.
He's an incredible contributor.
He just was so generous, like invited me to his home, and we just sat out by his sweat lodge on his property and let me interview him for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And just has so much wisdom.
He's sitting on a lot.
Yeah. He's taken on a lot.
Quite the job. Yeah. And I'm happy. So he's Lakota, I believe. A lot of Native American church peyote work, and like, as is the case tragically and unfortunately with a lot of these Native American leaders, he's even been shot for being a loud voice in the space for Native rights, which it sucks. It's par for the course. It's like not a good look on anybody, but it's just like, that's what he's holding, right? And he's still going forward despite that, which is amazing.
Yeah. That guy is amazing. That's great. You're speaking with him, and they're speaking on this subject, because that just seemed to be like when people were thinking like psychedelics and plant medicines were basically the same thing, or just putting them in the same category and not feeling like the differences were significant. It just causes a lot of problems, like in general, or like could get people in a lot of trouble, and thinking that, if they read an article about ketamine, that it helps depression, and think like, oh yeah, and there's this ayahuasca thing that my friend told me about that'll help my depression. Like,
it's like this ketamine and ayahuasca are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I had someone reach out to me, which kind of, I guess, inspired wanting to cover this, who was really new to this, and they wanted to work on their trauma, and talking about like MDMA and ayahuasca like they were two options of the same thing. I was like, let's pump the brakes a bit. Pretty different.
You did a good job on that part too in the book, for what it's worth. Like that, just that framing on that particular problem. It was like good, because there's so many people that have no clue of all the nuances here, and
it's so complicated.
Right. This is like more complex than almost anything we're dealing with as a species, perhaps despite like climate change and extinction.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's so much nuance here. Somebody could just have realize everything's numbers, and then the other person could have the most, beyond, like, as if that's not a mystical experience, but like start interacting with all sorts of strange entities that may or may not have some sort of real ontological status. And there's a lot to this conversation.
Yeah, totally. And I think the narrative came, like the new narrative, or the like narrative of the last post Pollan and somewhat pre Pollan, like it waters things down. It kind of had to, like a simplified narrative started coming across, like, psilocybin in these contexts heals this. Like, look at this research from Johns Hopkins, and MDMA heals this. Look at this research, and like, that was important for like PR and like getting people to like see that. And I think we're at a place now where like people have gotten in trouble as a result of that, not necessarily to a fault of their own, just underestimating what they're dealing with and what they're getting into.
Right. So
I think it's good to talk more about, like, go deeper into those complications you're referring to.
Right. So this one might be tricky. Well, let's see what we get. It's okay if we need to move it. So like Pollan's book, it like really satiated an appetite that the West had. It sold like crazy, got like a lot of speaking gigs out of it. Somebody told me at one point, like, Michael Pollan published like the complete history of psychedelics. Like, whoa. I'm like, no, it's a good book. It's a good overview, kind of. But like, I don't know. Like, I appreciated the book. I was also frustrated with the book. But like, what did you like, and what were you frustrated by, and how did you maybe like turn that into what you worked on with your book?
Do you mean with Pollan's
book? Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely understand like the frustrations and limitations, and like for me, I loved his book. I got it right away. I went to his, like, he did a event at the Tattered Cover.
Nice.
In Denver.
Yeah, I bought it the day it was out too.
Nice. Yeah, and I remember hearing about it when it was coming out, and like I'd been learning about this stuff for like a year. And, Michael Pollan was like the big food writer who's like been on Oprah and like all these things. Just like, and there was just a clarity, like, this is going to change things. Like, holy cow, this is really going to change things. And I got it signed by him after that signing, and I was just starting to write. I'm going to come back to the book itself, but I asked him in our little few moments together, because I was worried about like putting my name on stuff about psychedelics, and kind of asked him about that, and he just gave a really, really helpful reply, which essentially was like, I can't tell you what to do, but like there was a lot of reputational risk for me from a certain perspective. Like, I had a lot more risk than you just getting into this, and I've gotten nothing but positive feedback. And so that invited me to step into more. And he was helpful with this book, like when they were questioning whether or not to give this no-name author the deal. Like, we had been in touch. You actually helped get us in touch when you connected me to the Berkeley Center for like some little thing that didn't turn into anything, but I had his email. And he said he would agree to an interview, which helped them like, okay, well, this could be marketable. And he did let me interview him. But back to his book. Yeah, I thought it was really great look at psychedelics in the West. like a certain like Western history, like a certain
It's like a certain focus,
a
right?
certain focus, yeah, and that
Slant.
yeah, and that it had the narratives that people will like be able to digest in the science, and that is really like amazing important stuff. But when it is seen as like the whole history of everything, that's like kind of a problem. Like
You need like 20 volumes for that.
yeah, totally. So I liked his follow up, like This Is Your Mind on Plants, when he did that long thing on
I enjoyed
mescaline.
that.
Yeah, I guess a little more, because when I interviewed him, he said, I asked him if he had any regrets about how to change your mind, and what he said was like not having the like indigenous perspectives and plant medicines, and I think he was trying to rectify that a bit with the mescaline thing. So yeah, I appreciate his book, but I also like I was trying to get broader. Like he goes super deep in a narrower focus, and I tried to go like, I guess, to the depth that I could with a broader focus to try and like widen the scope, and not like, put the Western history from 1950 onward up on this like glorified pedestal. Like we're actually like babies with this, and people all around the world have been like working with these medicines or not these exact ones, but like psychoactive psychedelic medicines for a long time. And we're late to the game, and we were assholes to them too.
Right.
We got a lot of owning up to do there.
For sure. They didn't have the Grateful Dead though. Kidding, guys. You didn't, but
yeah,
different story.
It's true.
Different kinds of music. So
Grateful Dead.
Some stuff from Poland, like some of the critiques were like it was more of a history of the men in the psychedelic movement. I've heard that from a lot of women critics, like, and this is going to give Pollan some interesting credit here in this conversation, but it was kind of a gonzo approach to his writing, because he was like, okay, I'm going to do these things and I'm going to write around it. And I thought that was, clever and good. And that's just how he does his books. Like I've been a fan for a long time. And I like that you wanted to go broader in scope. I think that was really important. Like there's far more narratives that need to get raised. And you did a nice job even getting into some serious detail around the iboga stuff, like kind of like 3/4 of the way through the ayahuasca chapter. And you did some great stuff there. Like, thank God you did that, because everybody thinks ayahuasca culture is a monoculture.
What do you mean by that?
So there's only one group that originated what we've in the West adopted or appropriated around ayahuasca culture, like Shipibo only or something. It's like there's so much more. I think in the book you said 150 identified groups who are using ayahuasca, maybe.
Gotcha. Yeah, whatever I found from whatever research there is. But yeah, that was kind of surprising to find, because that was kind of the only narrative I'd heard, just like kind of coming from one source. But there's like so many different ones, and plenty we probably don't even know about, who have their own ways of approaching it, their own ways of brewing it, their own unique rituals.
One of my friends made it. I think there was a scenario where he bribed generals at the Venezuelan border to let him in. And then he was going deep upriver to like do all sorts of recording with shamans about their traditions that we can't really get access to on account of I assume it's sanctions against Venezuela. Yeah. It's crazy.
That is completely wild. Wow. That's
imagine
courageous individual.
Some guts.
Jeez.
I like doing edgy stuff like that, but the idea of bribing like government officials as an American, I know the penalties are not good. Yeah. It's more about I'm not going to do well in prison.
Yeah, I have that fear too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, keeps things within a certain boundary.
Right. But I'll if that's of interest, I can try to link you up with him later. I think that would be a cool story.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the plant medicine side of things, like, after this book, I've just been like focusing on this stuff for so long. I'm like, do I even want to write about this anymore? And like when I've reflected on that, like the plant medicine stuff and just the complexities of the different indigenous traditions, and like that still like I just have so much more to learn there, and I want to keep learning more about that. It's just
writing's a good way to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just such a great way to follow my interests, or like come upon new interests.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love writing.
So how do we kind of differentiate the two? Plant medicine, psychedelics, obviously plant medicine being a general umbrella that includes apparently now animals and fungi.
With the
Bufo. Yeah. Despite the risk to extinction and everything else that, folks like Mike Tyson are pushing, like hyping it a little too much.
Yeah. He sounded like he does it a lot.
Yeah. It's changed him, but it's really changed the ecological viability of the species, I think, too.
Yeah.
It's like there was a recent paper published on it by Robert Villa from the Tucson Herpetological Society about how delicate those habitats are, and it's not good. I just want people to back off of that animal.
Just the synthetic kind of apparently
seems to be just fine.
Yeah, totally.
Safer
too. Yeah, you can control the dose more.
Yeah, not like it's not it's a fucking plenty of a doozy and synthetic too, everybody. So anyway, how do you like to talk about this differentiation between like things like LSD, MDMA, 2CB, like this whole category of man-made molecules versus earth-derived sources?
Yeah, that is a good question. It feels hard to like draw like the categorical line.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like context is a big piece. Like when I was talking about plant medicines in the book, at least, I'm pretty sure all the ones I was talking about have like a long history of use and like interweaving with a cultural mythology of a particular time and place and system of meaning. And just less processing. Because so many of these psychedelics come from the plant medicine, like psilocybin. It's fungi medicine, but still used in that category. So I guess when it kind of gets extracted as the molecule and made synthetic, then kind of moves over to that psychedelic category. I don't know if that's across the board, but kind of specified or itemized and brought into like a microscope on it kind of context.
Pinchbeck had this really good idea years ago that I appreciated, and it was kind of about the long history of use of some of these plants, fungi, where there's some sort of imprinting and kind of like, for lack of a better word, egregore created between, like a spiritual thing that's created between the plant and the human experiencers, and kind of like in a Jungian sense, a kind of collective unconscious pool or collective pool available of things, and that kind of colors the experience when it has that. And when LSD was created, there was no kind of like depth of association between the molecule and humans, and so we were actively creating that. And I found that a really fascinating thing.
That's good.
Experiencers co-creating that karmic pool or whatever, however you want to frame that thing.
I like that explanation better than anything I just said. Getting more into the metaphysical distinctions.
Yeah. So we started because like I was frustrated. It's a similar frustration to maybe what you had, was the way people were talking about this stuff was so boring. And it's like, oh yeah, cool. Like 67% have a positive clinical result. Like I come from a philosophy background. Like how do I relate to that? It's like a kind of abandoned data point.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much richness here. Like how do you like to think about that?
Yeah, totally. I didn't know that was why you were getting into
preserving
this
our
too.
teacher's legacy and hyping Groff's work, because it was glaringly absent, which is at the end of the day amalgamation of Freud, Jung, and the rest of the depth tradition in
Totally.
Europe, right?
Oh yeah, Groff. It's amazing. Yeah, I think I just had such a similar reaction because like I imagine that you were coming from having had some of these experiences
Mostly through
yourself.
breath work. But
Oh, okay, yeah, you
mostly
have
through
the-
breath work, but I've really put in the footwork over the last long number of years too. But yeah, most of my early days were breath work, so like deeply Groff.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So really powerful holotropic experiences. But yeah, I think the statistics were interesting and great, and it was like I felt stoked that they symbolized that like the culture was changing, and that like I never thought that was going to happen. That like they were going to come back around. It was just like, well, after the 60s, they're all legal, and that's the way it is, and will forever be. So I was excited about it, but then at the same time, yeah, there was like the subjective experience, like that is so powerful and meaningful and weird, and it just felt like that was getting like edited out, and that also the whole like 1960s and the second half was kind of getting edited out, and when it would be talked about in a scientific paper, it was like a reference point for like what we're not going to do, like this was the problem with that, and like
This is not the
doing
60s.
it this way. Yeah, the scientists are like, yeah, and like, yeah, none of them, all of them having this like objective distance, like, are you all objective on this? Have you never tried it?
Right.
Which, yeah, it's part of the game they're playing in the scientific academia that suppose they had to, but yeah, it's just like, wow, well, so many of the things that like made me interested in this in the first place, like the music from the 1960s and writing and expression and just the culture, Woodstock, like I don't want that to get edited out. And,
Right.
And yeah, just
It's crucial.
yeah, it was like a wariness to talk about, I think, that and the subjective experience, because probably because everyone knows how like weird and uncontrollable it gets, but
Right.
I don't want that to be seen as a negative thing.
Right. Right. It's part of it, and it's just something that we're not comfortable with in this like overly, let's go back to Nietzsche, like Apollonian culture, where like really controlled, measured, rational, theoretically.
Theoretically, yeah, present that way.
Yeah, and like you're just really bury and cover up Dionysian, like just really wild festival culture. It's like, oh, that's not really part of this, or is it?
Yeah. That's cool you said Dionysian, because that Nietzsche, and he kind of separated the Apollonian, the Dionysian, and the birth of tragedy. Like Apollonian's that formal kind of part of the Greek culture, and the Dionysian.
Make sure my tuxedo is cool versus like I'm gonna drink so much tonight.
Yeah, yep.
Whatever
Just-
weird intoxicant they had.
Yeah, going full Eleusis tonight,
Mhm.
like whatever was going on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just so much shadow to try and edit that out of our contemporary experience and the like continued history of psychedelic use
Yeah.
even after they became illegal.
Right. Right. It's a big deal. Reading an interesting, listening to a lecture series by a classicist out of Albany. I forget his name, but the idea that all these symposiums that they used to have, the quote unquote drinking parties,
Oh yeah.
like Plato's Symposium, for instance, like the host would actually get to decide how much they were drinking and how much and what kind of inebriation they would have. And they were like big mixers. Like they would mix things, decant things, dilute it. Wild. And this shit was not just alcohol. Like the level to which they were getting inebriated was far beyond what was available, I think, through like 14% wine, which is kind of like the natural upper limit for like a natural ferment without distillation, which came a bunch later. So there had to be so many psychedelic plants and psychoactives in there.
So do you like the thing that the immortality key is about, like that the Eleusis brew, the Kykeon, may have been was a psychedelic sacrament with ergot? Do you?
This is a great question. So probably, but also historian and classicist friend of mine brought up this really interesting idea. Like, why do we need it as a story that we lean on?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting, legitimizing story if true, but like, why are we looking for legitimacy in like ancient traditions, like in the European path? Like, I don't know. Like, there are definitely psychedelic traditions before Eleusis, in my opinion. We just don't have evidence for it. Like there, the caves that Graham Hancock always points out, like supernatural, like that kind of stuff. And then, I don't know. It's a big open question for me, and I don't really care that I have like a firm opinion one way or the other. I just ran through the Ruck Hoffman book, Road to Eleusis, and it was a compelling enough argument. They make some really good arguments, but I'm like, this alone isn't enough to say, yes, I'm a true believer now,
Yeah. But that kind of zoom out question of like, why does that really matter?
Why do we really need it?
Yeah, like, well, the Greeks did it, so therefore we should too.
They did some things that we shouldn't do.
Yeah,
for sure.
Don't want to model everything off of them.
They did some okay stuff that was pretty
cool
historically groundbreaking, but yeah, do we really want to fully model off that? And it's an open question. I don't know. Where do you kind of land on that one? I'm told the correct pronunciation is Kukion now.
Kukion.
I always went with Kikion.
Oh, okay.
But Kukion apparently, which is what Murarescu had in his audiobooks at least.
He got it.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Good for him.
Good for him. Yeah. Kukion. I like to think of that, and I feel like if it wasn't in the brew itself, whatever they were doing down there, like, has the same kind of feel, the way people talked about it, as a psychedelic experience. And we know that like these holotropic states don't need a like specific plant or fungi in order to be induced, like through maybe there's ecstatic dancing or other intoxicants, but like they'd come out like transformed and feel like they kind of were like touched the divine or whatever. And so, yeah, I think I love that Albert Hoffman talked a lot about it, especially later in his life. And like what I've read from him was to really just focus on like the importance of transformational like community, like sacramental gathering rituals that are like actually essential to society. And I think we lack that at any collective scale, like a rite of passage kind of thing. And I don't know I don't think it's realistic to think of that at a collective scale, but like I think there's still a craving for it. And yeah, Hoffman like just talked so much about how approaching LSD in like that kind of really intentional and sacramental way was so important. And yeah, I just think there's like, I feel like there's important things in that to think about. Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
Shared system of like meaning and mythology, these reference points. I mean, I think
shared experience set.
Yeah, totally. Especially like on like non-duality,
Right, because in their world, like it was a reciprocal and kind of entangled relationship with the gods. Like the humans were there to make sure the gods could keep going, and vice versa. And it was a very fascinating like system. Mm-hmm. So there is some like interesting non-dual elements there, and connecting people with the seasons, the story of the seasons, which explains this fall, winter, summer, spring deal, but also like seasons of our lives. And like the biggest lesson there was being more comfortable with the idea of dying and moving on.
Right.
And dying is part of living, and
we need that.
We do not have any of that really in our current culture. Like we're not ready to let go, and we're going to hold on as long as we
Fight
can.
At all costs. Yeah.
Which, the costs are kind of high these days. The risks are high for culture at large for us doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, it seems like that was like a key point from it, and part of what was so transformational. And I wish that I had conquered my fear of death already. Like, I don't want to die, but like, yeah, I don't really know many people. I guess some who are more comfortable with it or do, but yeah.
I'm gonna keep going till I can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not an easy problem to solve or get comfort around, but this is one of the ways. I think psychedelic exposure like can make that fear lesser and lesser.
Yeah.
And if done skillfully and well, which is a whole another problem to solve.
Sure, yeah. Do you think it's like because they give something that's similar to an experience of death, or they like put people face to face with their mortality in a space where they can kind of accept it more?
It's a few multifactorial. So that one for sure gives them an experience and like makes them confront it. Also, it gives you an experience of shifting into something very different from, the normal air breathing mammal we are. Most of us are, I think. But yeah, like how do we get a frame of reference for becoming something so different and losing our like core identity and comforts, as opposed to, kind of being a neuropic grad, you probably get some of this, like awareness, just pure being like watching and like being with, as opposed to like fighting and resisting, and being curious maybe is a support tool for that. It's a fascinating shift from where we are today in culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think an important one too.
Right.
Yeah.
So with your book, like what, what's like the biggest walkaway message you would hope somebody walks away from the book with? This is like book talk with Joe.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
Good questions. Got a few things coming to mind, but like the one I'll say is something around like change being possible, inner and outer change, and like on that note, like what any person who reads it has generally accepted as, like reality, capital R reality, about their inner world, about their identity, who they are, about what's possible in the outer world, may not necessarily be capital R reality, and that they can gain awareness of their own self-constructed limitations, and going into places past that doesn't have to be terrifying or earth-shattering, and that it can be kind of liberating.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that people aren't trapped. Like, I think we all are in different ways, but like there's keys to certain doors, and there's so much terrain inside and outside to explore. And I hope that book gives the sense that like that it's challenging at times, but also so illuminating and enriching.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. That's great. There's another pinchback line. There's so many like continents left to explore. Like this just opens up broad areas of exploration and ways that I don't think even those of us in the space are really able to grasp. It's just so much.
Totally. Yeah. And that's maybe like the underlying current of the book is like, yeah, we can't grasp everything. Like to me, science helps illuminate and, does amazing things. And if you track its history, it's a lot of like proving wrong what previous scientists proved right. Like that it all comes back to mystery. Like we still don't know what's going on, like why this is
Very
happening.
much.
And so, yeah, making a peace with the mystery or befriending the mystery and inquiring into it without needing an answer. Like Faust story or whatever. Like, that's probably going to drive you mad. Just trying to answer everything.
I'll make a request. If you ever want to write a play, a psychedelicized Faust would be top tier.
That's a good idea. Do you do any writing? We could collab.
Not yet. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Probably a musical.
Oh my God. That'd be so funny. I'm into it. Cool. So Sean, where can people find your book?
It's, I think, on most places where books are sold. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, if it's before June 4th, which is the publication date.
We could try to sync it up for that.
Okay. Well, if it is,
Yeah.
you could pre-order. If not, Barnes & Noble, Sounds True's website. People in the UK, Penguin Random House is like putting out a UK edition. You can buy in pounds and
Awesome.
get in different parts of the world. So, people can do that. And yeah, I have, I think, links on my website. If I don't, I will soon. SeanPLawlor.com.
Great.
So any of those places.
Awesome. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap?
Just a thank you to you. I know I thanked you before we recorded. I can't remember. It's come up a few times since we started, but really, really grateful for you, Joe, for having me here, for all your support through the years, like, a lot digitally, but anytime we've come to face, it's just always been great to see you. And it's such a crazy landscape to navigate. And as I have for these years, you've always just been this like solid, consistent, like heart-centered and heart-led person in the middle who I felt like I could talk to about whatever crazy stuff I was learning about that was like making me think like, screw this, like this is too messed up. And yeah, I just really, really appreciate you and Kyle and the whole Psychedelics Today team. And yeah, so many people to thank to get to this point where I have a book out and get to talk to you about it.
It's amazing. All right, Sean, thanks so much. And I hope we get to do this more.
Likewise, this was great.
Amazing.